June's legs ached as she dragged herself down the long corridor of Seoul General Hospital. 12 hours on her feet, running between rooms checking charts, calming crying children, and comforting elderly patients. It had been exhausting. She could barely remember the last time she had a full night's sleep. All she wanted now was a hot meal in her small apartment where she could curl up and finally rest. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She sighed before answering. "June, can you come to my office for a minute?" The voice of her manager, Mrs. Kong, said. It was late, and the hospital was already quiet, but the urgency in her tone made June pause. June followed Mrs. Kong to her office. "You've been working so much already," Mrs. Kong said, leaning on her desk. Her eyes were tired, like everyone else's in the hospital. "But we really need someone to cover an extra night shift tonight. The ward is short, and the patients, they need you." June swallowed. She rubbed her temples. Her body screamed at her to say no, to leave and finally rest. But she knew she couldn't. The patients depended on her. And when she imagined some elderly patient waiting for medicine, or a young child in pain, her guilt overpowered her fatigue. "Okay," she said quietly, trying to sound resolute. "I'll take it." Mrs. Kong gave her a grateful smile. "Thank you, June. I know it's a lot, but you're the only one I trust for this tonight." After leaving the office, June felt a heavy sense of responsibility settle over her. The hospital at night was different, quieter, yet somehow more intense. The fluorescent lights cast long shadows across the white walls, the hum of the machines louder than during the day. The occasional beep of monitors or the faint footsteps of another nurse passing by seemed magnified in the stillness. June moved down the corridor, her shoes clicking softly on the polished floor. She stopped first at room 402, checking the vitals of an elderly man who had been admitted for dehydration. "You're doing better today, Mr. Choi," she said gently. He smiled weakly, his eyes full of relief. Next, she entered room 405, where a young woman had just given birth. June adjusted the blanket around the newborn and whispered instructions to the mother. The mother's tired eyes met June's, and for a moment, they shared a silent understanding, the quiet bond between caregiver and patient. Everything seemed normal, almost routine. The hum of the hospital, the soft conversations, the tiny gestures of care. These were June's world. And yet, as she approached room 407, she felt an inexplicable tension. The door was slightly ajar, the soft glow of the bedside lamp spilling into the corridor. June's heart skipped a beat. Room 407 was one of the hospital's private rooms, reserved for patients who needed special care or wanted privacy. The walls were pale beige, the floors immaculate, and the single bed neatly made. Normally, the room was quiet at night, with only the soft hum of machines keeping the stillness company. Tonight, June noticed that the room felt different. The air seemed heavier, like it was charged with some quiet energy she couldn't explain. She stepped inside, her shoes squeaking softly on the polished floor. There, sitting upright in bed with a book in his hands, was a man. He looked ordinary at first glance. Black hair neatly combed, pale skin that contrasted sharply with the dark pajamas he wore, and a faint, tired smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. But there was something about him, an unusual calmness, a quiet confidence, that made June pause at the door. "Hello," she said softly, stepping closer. "Are you feeling okay?" The man looked up from his book and met her gaze. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, and somehow familiar. He smiled politely. "Yes, thank you. I just prefer the quiet nights," he replied. His voice was calm, almost soothing, yet carried an undertone June couldn't place. June noticed that he was alone. No family, no visitors, no nurse by his side. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender from the previous cleaning, but there was also something else. A faint, elusive scent she couldn't identify. Something about the combination of his presence and the room made her heart beat a little faster. She moved toward the bed and checked his vitals automatically, her professional routine taking over. Pulse steady. Temperature normal. Blood pressure slightly elevated, but not dangerously so. She adjusted the blanket over his shoulders and smoothed it down carefully. "Do you need anything?" she asked, her voice polite but soft. "No, thank you," he said. He closed his book and rested it on the bedside table. "I'm just reading and waiting for the night to pass." June studied him for a moment. She couldn't place why, but she felt a strange sense of familiarity, as if she had seen him before somewhere. The feeling made her uneasy, yet at the same time, it sparked a curiosity she hadn't felt in years. "All right," she said finally, straightening up. "If you need anything, just press the call button." "Thank you, June," he said, his gaze lingering on her for a fraction longer than normal. Then he returned to his book and she turned to leave. As she walked out, she felt a chill crawl up her spine, though the room was warm. Something about him stayed with her, the quiet intensity, the way he seemed calm but aware of everything around him. June shook her head slightly, trying to focus on the rest of her rounds. She passed room 408 and 409, attending to patients in need, but her thoughts kept drifting back to room 407. One man, one quiet night, and a feeling she couldn't explain, a sense that meeting him was no coincidence. She tried to push it away, focusing on her duties, on the hum of the machines, on the tired faces of the patients who truly depended on her. But deep down, June knew that something had shifted that night. Something had started. Something that would slowly, irresistibly pull her into a life she could never have imagined. Over the next week, June found herself visiting room 407 more often, not just out of duty, but because she wanted to see him. She learned that his name was Min Ho, a man in his early 30s recovering from a serious accident. The details were vague, he didn't volunteer much, but each conversation revealed glimpses of his life. A brief mention of work, a fleeting memory of travel, a quiet sadness in his eyes that hinted at past pain. The more she talked to him, the more she realized he was different from other patients. Min Ho had a presence that seemed to fill the room without effort. There was a calm confidence in the way he sat, in the way he spoke, that made the hospital, with all its machines and chaos, feel smaller and strangely manageable when he was around. One particularly quiet night, June was checking his vitals when he suddenly leaned closer, his voice almost a whisper. "Do you ever feel like life is too heavy?" he asked. "That something is waiting to change everything?" June felt a shiver run down her spine. She blinked, startled by the intensity in his tone. Without thinking, she nodded. "Sometimes," she whispered. Min Ho smiled faintly, almost as if relieved by her answer. "Good," he said. "Because soon things will change for both of us." His words hung in the air long after she left the room. June couldn't explain why, but a mixture of curiosity and unease took root in her chest. Something about Min Ho suggested danger, yes, but also something irresistible, something she was drawn toward whether she wanted to be or not. The next evening, June was leaving the hospital, her shoulders heavy with fatigue. The night was cold, and a thin drizzle made the neon lights of the hospital entrance blur. As she walked toward the exit, she noticed a man in a black coat standing near the ward doors. He was staring at her, just standing there, silent, watching. June's heart skipped a beat, a shiver running down her spine. Something about him was wrong. Her instincts screamed at her to hurry, to ignore him, to not make eye contact. She did as her instincts told her. She walked quickly, keeping her head down, and left without looking back. The next morning, a whisper of unease clung to her like fog. She learned that Min Ho had left the hospital unexpectedly. No one knew why, and the nurses hadn't been told anything. His bed had been cleared, his belongings packed. June felt a strange emptiness settle in her chest, a nagging worry she couldn't explain. Then her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. June hesitated for a moment, then answered cautiously. "June?" The voice on the other end was urgent but calm. Her heart leapt. "Min Ho?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yes, it's me. I need your help," he said. His tone was low, tense. "You have no idea what's happening, but I can't do this alone. Please, can you meet me?" June's pulse quickened. Fear, concern, and curiosity collided inside her. Something dangerous was unfolding. Something bigger than a hospital room or a patient's recovery. She knew without a doubt that saying no was no longer an option. June's hand shook slightly as she pushed open the door to the small cafe near the hospital. The warm smell of coffee mixed with the faint scent of pastries, but she barely noticed. Min Ho sat at a corner table, hunched slightly over a cup of tea, his eyes scanning the street outside every few seconds. "June," he said quietly, his voice low with urgency as soon as he saw her. "I'm glad you came." She slid into the seat opposite him, studying his face. There was a tension she had never seen in a hospital patient before. An anxiety that made him seem smaller, human in a way that both frightened and drew her in. "They're after me," he said suddenly, leaning closer so no one else could hear. "I didn't tell the hospital everything. I shouldn't even be here. But you can help me." June's pulse quickened. Panic surged through her, but strangely so did trust. Something in his eyes told her he wasn't exaggerating, that danger truly lurked nearby. "Who's after you?" she asked, her voice a mix of fear and determination. He shook his head, glancing again at the street. "It's complicated. I can't explain everything over the phone, but you need to come with me. Tonight. If you don't, it will be too late." June's mind raced. Every instinct screamed to say no, to walk away, to return to her predictable life. But something inside, an unexplainable pull, made her nod. "Okay," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. "I'll come." Minho gave a small, relieved smile. "Good. We have to be careful. They won't hesitate to stop anyone who knows too much." As they left the cafe, June realized her life, once predictable, was about to spiral into something she could never have imagined. The streetlights cast long shadows on the empty pavement, and with every step, the ordinary world of hospital shifts and quiet nights seemed to fade further behind her. They moved quickly through dimly lit alleyways and silent streets, their footsteps echoing softly. June's heart raced, not just from the cold, but from the tension that wrapped around them like a second skin. Finally, Minho stopped in front of a modest apartment building tucked between two shuttered stores. "This is it," he whispered, leading her inside. The apartment was small but chaotic. Papers, photos, and folders were scattered across the floor, piled on tables stacked in corners. A laptop hummed softly on the desk, screens filled with files and documents. June's eyes widened. "I didn't know you had all this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know who else to trust," he said, running a hand through his hair, his face tight with worry. "I discovered something dangerous about a company that runs several hospitals in Seoul. They've been hiding experiments on patients like me." June's stomach sank. "Experiments?" "Yes," he said. "They're illegal. Some patients never even knew they were part of it. They were monitored, tested, sometimes worse, and they will stop at nothing to keep it secret. People who ask questions disappear. I need proof, but I can't do it alone." She took a deep breath, her mind racing. The papers, the hidden files, the urgency in his eyes. It all felt unreal, yet terrifyingly real. Her safe, predictable life of hospital shifts, routines, and familiar faces had vanished in an instant. I understand," she said finally, her voice trembling but firm. "I can help. What do we do first?" Minho looked at her, a mixture of relief and something like hope softening his tense features. "We start carefully, one step at a time, and we must trust no one else." June sank into a chair, her mind spinning. She thought about her family, her job, her life back at the hospital. She could leave, pretend she never met him, and return to the safety of her routine. The fear whispered in her ear, warning her to stay away from danger. But something deeper, fear mingled with curiosity, and a growing attachment to Minho, pushed her forward. Her heart told her that this was bigger than herself, bigger than hospital routines, bigger than any choice she had made before. She looked at Minho, watching him sort through the scattered files, his determination clear even in the soft lamplight. "We do this together," she said finally, her voice calm but resolute. "But we have to be careful. One wrong move, and we could be in real danger." Minho's face softened, and a relieved smile broke through the tension. "I knew I could trust you," he said, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "Thank you, June. This means more than you know." She nodded, feeling a strange mixture of fear, adrenaline, and determination coursing through her. There was no turning back. They were partners now, bound by danger, trust, and the pursuit of a truth that could change everything. As the night deepened outside, June realized she was stepping into a life she had never imagined. One of secrets, risks, and choices that would test everything she thought she knew about herself. Her ordinary world was gone. The next week passed in a blur of exhaustion and adrenaline. June barely slept, her days spent at the hospital, and her nights at Minho's small, cluttered apartment. Every surface was covered with papers, photographs, and folders full of documents they had taken from Minho's old hospital files and leaked internal reports. June carefully examined a folder labeled Patient Follow-ups, Confidential. Her hands shook slightly as she flipped through the pages. There were records of patients who had been admitted for minor procedures but had disappeared within days. Some were never discharged. Others were listed as having left against medical advice, though the hospital had no proof they ever did. They just vanish? June whispered, staring at the files. Minho nodded grimly. And these aren't accidents. Someone is hiding experiments, illegal ones, on patients who can't fight back. He held up a small USB drive. I found video recordings from hidden cameras inside several private rooms. Some patients never even knew they were being filmed. June's stomach twisted. She felt bile rise in her throat. Why would anyone do this? How is this legal? It's not, Minho said. His voice was low, tight with anger. They have connections. Doctors, board members, even some government officials. That's why the hospital keeps it quiet. People who ask questions disappear. June swallowed hard, her mind spinning. She glanced at the photos scattered on the table. Blurred images of patients hooked up to unknown machines. Doctors in surgical masks conducting unusual procedures, medical charts with falsified entries. Her hands trembled as she touched one of the charts. They're experimenting on humans like lab rats, she said, her voice barely audible. Minho put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. That's why I left. I couldn't be part of it. But now we can stop them. We just need proof. They spent days cross-referencing files, reviewing hidden camera footage, and taking photos of everything. Every new discovery made their hearts race with a mix of fear and determination. June realized the depth of the corruption went beyond her imagination. It wasn't just one hospital. It was a network of clinics under the same company, all connected. That night, as they pored over a stack of files, a sudden noise made June freeze. A soft click at the apartment door. Someone's here, she whispered, her voice shaking. Minho grabbed her hand. Hide. Quickly. They slipped into the small closet in the corner of the apartment, cramming themselves into the narrow space. The smell of old clothes and dust filled her nose. June's heart pounded in her chest, each beat loud in the silence. She pressed her back against the wall, trying not to make a sound. Footsteps creaked on the wooden floor outside the closet. Someone was moving through the apartment, stopping to open drawers, shuffle papers, and mutter under their breath. June could hear the soft click of a flashlight scanning the room. She squeezed Minho's hand, gripping it so tightly her knuckles went white. This is real, she whispered. We can't go back. Minho's eyes met hers, filled with resolve. Then we keep going. Together. No matter what happens. The footsteps paused right outside the closet. June's breath caught. The door handle rattled. She pressed herself closer to Minho, trying to become invisible. The intruder lingered as if sensing something, then moved on, leaving the apartment in silence once more. June exhaled shakily, tears of fear and relief slipping down her cheeks. We almost didn't make it. Minho pulled her into a brief embrace. We will be careful. We have to. But now we know the truth is worth fighting for. She nodded, feeling a strange mix of terror and determination. Every shred of doubt was gone. The hospital's secret experiments, the missing patients, the danger lurking in every shadow. It was all real. And now she was a part of it. Her life would never be the same again. June realized that taking that extra shift had changed everything. She was no longer just a nurse. She was part of something bigger, fighting for justice and truth. In the months that followed, June and Minho worked carefully, exposing the secrets, helping victims, and surviving threats they never imagined. Their lives intertwined in a way that went beyond chance. They had met at the right time in the right place, and their choices had made their lives unrecognizably different. June often thought back to that night in room 407. One extra shift. One patient. One choice. And suddenly life would never be the same again. For more, please subscribe, like, share, and comment.